Exactly 12 months ago, I interviewed one of the bravest women I've ever met for one of the most shocking stories I've ever reported. Jane was among 13 Australian women who'd been hauled off flights in the wealthy Persian Gulf state of Qatar and physically violated by airport authorities. It was disgraceful, completely unnecessary conduct that at the time was condemned around the world. Scott Morrison and Foreign Minister Marise Payne angrily vowed to get an explanation for how and why it happened. But a year on, you guessed it, Jane and the other victims have heard nothing. In fact, the silence is so deafening, it's as if they didn't exist and their suffering never happened.
Police officers were coming on the plane and they had guns and things. I didn't know if it was a hostage situation. I didn't know if it was a terror situation.
Listening to Australian nurse Jane describe her humiliating ordeal at the hands of armed authorities at Qatar's international airport is as gut-wrenching today as when she first described it last November.
We felt like criminals, really. I just kept thinking, oh my goodness, if they think that I'm guilty of something, like what's going to happen to me in this country? Yeah.
To think such barbarity could exist in the 2020s defied logic. But in Qatar, atrocity like this appears to be sanctioned.
It was incredibly unfair. We're struggling because we're all wondering why, and we had no choice.
Jane, along with 12 other Australian women, were subjected to degrading physical abuse as they transited through the Persian Gulf state. They'd been targeted because a newborn baby was found abandoned in the airport, and Qatari police, convinced a crime had occurred, were determined to locate its mother. Almost unbelievably, women of childbearing age were rounded up and forced to undergo invasive internal examinations.
I stepped up into the ambulance and there was a female in there, and all she said to me was this one line of, "A baby has been found in a bin and we need to test you."
I don't understand.
And what was going through your mind when she said we need to test you?
I was like, what are they testing me for? What's going to be done to me right now?
This is a grossly disturbing, offensive, concerning set of events.
It was appalling. As father of daughters, I could only shudder.
When news of the incident was first reported, our leaders promised action.
We find this unacceptable. That's been the official message, because it is unacceptable.
But a year on, no answers, no apologies, nothing but heartless silence. Now, more of the victims feel compelled to speak, with outrage being added to their ongoing distress.
I thought that we're now kidnapped, we're going to be held as political pawns, we're going to be raped, and my child's going to be taken, we'll never see family again. It was the scariest moment of my life.
It was the 2nd of October last year, and 13 unsuspecting Australian women were among the passengers sitting on a Qatar Airways flight at Doha Airport, about to take off for Sydney. Anna and her young baby boy were in row 17, looking forward to getting home.
It was a huge relief. I remember in the plane, coming home and super happy. I think everybody in the plane was very excited.
A few seats away from Anna was Sophie, escaping COVID-ravaged London for the relative safety of Australia. Was it a relief when you finally boarded that plane?
Yeah, it was. By the time I got on the plane, it was, breathed a sigh of relief.
But as the passengers waited for takeoff, there was an unexplained delay. It lasted 4 frustrating hours before the doors of the aircraft were suddenly opened and armed guards stormed in.
There was a message over the loudspeaker, can all women disembark the aeroplane with their passports? And that just, for me, that everything just went kind of silent, and, the ringing in the ears start when you're really stressed, what's going on.
Everybody was just kind of looking in shock, looking around, looking for answers, trying to grab a flight attendant and ask what's going on, what's happening. I think the look on everybody's face just said it all. Like, it was a pretty scary moment, especially seeing the guards, which were wearing black gear and machine guns.
The women were ordered off the plane, into a lift and down to the airport tarmac.
And this was the moment where I broke down, and the other women started getting really uneasy because we realized that something sinister is happening here. I was crying, just squeezing my baby and shaking because I didn't want to go in an elevator with armed guards and not knowing where we're going, where we're taken.
Still without explanation, the armed guards divided the women into groups and marched them towards a row of ambulances. What happened next is harrowing.
I don't understand.
So she asked me if I would lay down on the table. So there was a table in the ambulance and I did. And she put like a medical sheet over me. And I was laying there thinking, I don't know what's about to happen to me. And she just asked me, we need to remove your pants. And I remember thinking, this is bizarre. Like, why am I having to remove my pants?
Yes, take off your pants. Take off.
So I pulled them down and she goes, we need to remove your underwear. And I said, I don't feel comfortable with removing my underwear. And I was physically holding them up and she's like, no, they need to come down. And I was like, why? Like, why? And I was in shock at that stage. I was like, I don't know what's happening. And I remember laying there thinking, this isn't right. This is not how this should be happening. This isn't how this should be done.
Like Jane, Sophie was paralysed with fear. She had no idea what was coming, but acted instinctively and demanded another woman go with her into the ambulance.
I think that was pretty good, kind of quick thinking on my part, just that I felt that I wasn't going alone into this ambulance. She's going to close the door and then who am I going to call? No one. So we went in together and that just meant, there was a witness, there was somebody there.
But Anna wasn't as lucky. Her only company was her 5-month-old son as a local nurse manhandled her into an ambulance.
And she said, I need you to lay down on the bed. And I'm like, what for? I'm not going to lay down on the bed. You tell me right now what is going on. And this is the moment she said, we found a baby in the toilet and we're looking for the mother. And I was like, this is ridiculous. This is my baby. And I thought that's going to be it. She's just going to fill my tummy over my clothes. And that's it. I just felt that she grabbed under my pants and my underwear and she stripped them. And for a second, I think my head was about to explode because I didn't know what just happened. And then she just said, you can go.
The examinations took about 5 minutes. When they were done, just as abruptly, the women were taken back to the plane.
I felt very angry. I felt full of rage leaving the ambulance, that I didn't have a stronger voice, that I allowed that to take place, that maybe I didn't protest enough before, and felt pretty powerless against what had just happened.
It's a humiliation and the abuse of power, the breach of my human rights. No one is allowed to touch me. No one is allowed to strip me naked without my consent. And that's what happened. And that's what happened in a major airport, one of the biggest airports in the world, with a major airline.
It is shocking, and I think, you should be shocked because it should never have happened. It is absolutely disgraceful that the Qatari authorities were in a position to just randomly take women off a plane and force them to be subject to an invasive gynecological exam.
Rothna Begum works for Human Rights Watch in London.
This was a Qatar Airways flight that was just stopping in Doha, and it was on its way to Australia.
She says Qatar is a dangerous country for women, with draconian laws including jail time for having a child out of wedlock.
A woman who has given birth to a child and abandoned them is a walking criminal. And so we're in a situation where I could see the authorities' immediate reaction being, we have to find that woman and we have to arrest her.
A year on, the pain of the physical abuse the women suffered is now being overtaken by the anger they feel because they've been forgotten. And while those responsible might think they've gotten away with their vile acts, they're mistaken.
These women have taken the brave decision to say, we're not going to stand by and allow this to have happened and let you get away with it. We want to see this end.
Prime Minister, it's been 1 year since Australian women were kicked out of the Qatar airline flight and strip searched. You were very vocal about it at the time. What has the Australian government been doing to help?
When Qatar Airways Flight 908 finally left Doha bound for Sydney on the 2nd of October last year, many of the passengers were in a state of shock and disbelief. Against their will, 13 Australian women had just been subjected to invasive examinations by Qatari authorities, who justified their actions because local police were searching for the mother of an abandoned newborn baby. The assaults were cruel and unnecessary, and made more difficult for the victims because they had to go into hotel quarantine when they landed back in Australia.
I was fairly traumatised and very shaken by that event. For then to go into a hotel room for 2 weeks, there was so much to process that I don't think I could actually process that part of it.
What Sophie did do, though, was call the Australian Federal Police. An investigation was launched, and news of Qatar's barbarity quickly spread around the world.
I remember when I first heard the reports that some women were taken off a plane and subjected to invasive gynecological exams. And I was quite shocked by that.
Women's rights campaigner Rothna Begum was stunned when she heard about the disgraceful conduct, and not just towards the Australians. She says there are an unknown number of other victims too.
We don't even know the number of women who were subject to such exams. There were 10 other flights where women were taken off.
You'd think that a place so obsessed with its public image would do whatever it takes to ensure that that image is upheld.
They thought that they could brush this under the carpet.
The small but very wealthy state of Qatar has long been accused of having little regard for human rights. When news of the scandal at the airport broke, Qatar's Prime Minister described the incident as unacceptable and promised to hold those responsible to account. A widely criticised investigation in Doha found one officer was to blame for the whole scandal. He reportedly received a suspended sentence, but no jail time. It wasn't just one policeman who did this, though, was it?
No, exactly. It was a number of them. So I think it's been really lax. Yeah, I would say very minimal accountability.
12 months on, there's yet to be any meaningful action. In Canberra, Qatar's ambassador added insult to injury by not even acknowledging a letter the Australian women had sent him.
It was probably near the sort of 1 year mark where we hadn't received any response, any apology, that we thought, okay, well, we were led, into these ambulances with no choice, but we've got a choice now and we have a voice now, and it would be remiss not to take action.
What I saw here was a group of women who had tried, even at that point, to adopt a reasonable tone and to try and conciliate an outcome with the Qatari authorities, and they were being ignored. Sometimes you need to deploy a legal remedy in circumstances where either moral or, in fact, even political or diplomatic pressure was getting nowhere. Okay, Liv and Daisy, we need to do a fair bit more in the way of research.
Lawyer Damien Sturzaker specialises in international law and human rights at Sydney's Mark law firm and is now representing 7 of the 13 Australians.
A sort of a mediated solution to the problem.
He's about to start action against the state-owned Qatar Airways and the airport's governing body, the Qatar Civil Aviation Authority, accusing them of assault, battery and deprivation of the women's liberty.
Certainly, the sort of conduct that occurred here was in breach of many international covenants and obviously in breach of human rights. One can see that it was a massive overreaction to the circumstances that the airport authorities found themselves in. One can't imagine that sort of thing occurring, say, at Mascot or at Tullamarine.
This is a David and Goliath battle, isn't it?
It certainly is. It certainly is. I mean, you can't take on a more challenging defendant than another country, a state of another country. And obviously the Qatar Airlines is owned by the state as well. We want a reasonable outcome for them and for positive steps to be taken to guarantee the safety of women and more generally people travelling through Doha.
It's probably no surprise, but Qatar doesn't seem at all concerned about being sued. The best the embassy could say was that they were considering the women's complaint. Qatar Airways was even more dismissive, refusing to meet or mediate with the women and saying their claim had no merit. The airline's response makes a mockery of its glossy advertising.
Travel safely with the airline you can rely on.
Clearly what they did to you, to all you women, is an utter violation of everything that they pretend to be.
This is the airline that wins all the awards for best customer experience and service and, all these accolades. I thought they would know better. We haven't heard from them, not a single word, not a letter, not an email, not a message, not a phone call. Nothing. Not a single apology.
However, it's not just the response of the Qatar authorities that disappoints Anna and Sophie.
And I expected the Prime Minister, being such a champion for women's rights, he'll be the first to jump and say, oh, hang on a minute. These women need protection, they need answers. Give them the answers.
We asked both the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister for interviews, but they said no.
It was an awful experience for those women. And yes, I did have a very strong view on that.
However, on Friday at a media conference, Scott Morrison said his government had already dealt with the scandal.
You were very vocal about it at the time. There's been no apology. What has the Australian government been doing to help?
Well, what I'm pleased about, and following the representations that we've made, I'm very pleased that there was an investigation, there has been a conviction, and there has been a significant change to airport processes in Qatar.
You'd think if the airport in Doha had acknowledged its failings and changed its practices, the women involved would have been the first to know about it. But they tell us they haven't heard a thing from either Qatar or Canberra. Do you think the Australian government has done enough?
No, very much no. I think we've been ignored. The Australian government hasn't come across as a strong support at all, and we feel pretty angry about that.
For the women, this is about achieving justice after being subjected to an horrific incident they were powerless to prevent. They want to make sure no one is forced to endure the same treatment ever again.
Quite frankly, we do want that apology. We want someone reaching out to us and listening to us. You did this to us. You can't just pretend that nothing happened and hoping that it's going to go away, because it's not going to go away. We're now angry.
Hello, I'm Sarah Abo. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our Extra Minutes segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.